Eden 4 was not a fortress. It was a garden. It was the kind of planet humanity had always dreamed of finding. The sky was a perfect, soft blue, and the grass was a deep, vibrant green that stretched out for miles. There were no heavy factories here. There were no orbital defense cannons pointing angrily at the stars. There were only small towns, research centers, and families. On this planet, the air smelled like rain and honey. It was a place where people went to forget about the harshness of the universe. Commander Vance sat on his wooden porch, watching the sun begin to set. He was an old man now. His hair was gray, and his face had deep lines carved by years of stress and combat. Vance was a retired soldier, a veteran of the Terran Space Force. He had seen enough war for 10 lifetimes. He had seen ships burn and friends die in the cold dark of space. But that was all behind him now. "Grandpa. Look at me." Vance smiled. The hardness in his eyes melted away. He looked toward the large oak tree in the yard. His 7-year-old granddaughter, Lily, was swinging higher and higher, her laughter ringing out like a bell. She was the reason he had moved here. She was the reason he had put down his rifle and picked up a gardening tool. "Be careful, Lily," Vance called out, his voice rough but gentle. "Don't jump off until it stops." "I'm not scared," she shouted back, beaming with joy. For a moment, everything was perfect. It was the definition of peace. Then, the birds stopped singing. It happened instantly. One moment, the garden was filled with the sounds of nature, the wind in the leaves, the chirping of insects. The next moment, there was dead silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Vance frowned. The old instincts, buried deep inside him, woke up. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He looked at the sky. The sun was disappearing. It wasn't a cloud. It was a shadow. A massive, jagged shadow was moving across the atmosphere, blocking out the light. It was not one ship. It was hundreds. They hung in the sky like black daggers, sharp and ugly. They were covered in dark metal plates and glowed with a sickly purple light. There was no warning. There was no radio hail asking for identification. There was no demand for surrender. The Krell Empire had arrived. Vance didn't freeze. He moved. He stood up from his chair so fast it fell over. "Lily. Run to the shelter. Now." The little girl stopped swinging. She looked at the sky, her eyes wide with confusion. She didn't understand. She had never seen a warship. She had never known fear. "Grandpa," she whispered. "Run." Vance roared, sprinting toward her. But he was too far away. And the Krell were not here to talk. High above, on the bridge of the lead dreadnought, General Zar looked down at the green planet. He was a large creature, with thick, chitinous armor and 4 eyes that blinked independently. He held a glass of wine in his hand. "Look at them," Zar sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "The humans. They build gardens on the edge of the unknown. They are so soft. They think the galaxy is safe." "Targeting locked, General," a subordinate officer reported. "We have locked onto the industrial centers and the military barracks." Zar shook his head. "No. Cancel that." The officer paused. "General? If you destroy a factory, they will rebuild it," Zar said coldly. "If you destroy a soldier, they will recruit another. We are not here to fight a battle, Lieutenant. We are here to send a message. We need to break their spirit. We need to show them that expanding into our territory comes with a price they cannot pay." Zar pointed a clawed finger at the screen. "Target the population centers. Target the schools. Target the parks. Kill their future." "Firing," the officer said. On the ground, Vance was 10 feet away from Lily when the sky opened up. Thick beams of purple plasma slammed into the earth. They didn't hit the ground with a thud, they hit with a scream of burning air. The shockwave knocked Vance off his feet. He tumbled through the grass, hitting his head hard. The world turned into fire and noise. The beautiful blue sky was gone, replaced by smoke and the red glow of burning cities. "Lily!" Vance screamed, scrambling to his knees. He looked toward the oak tree. The tree was gone. The swing was gone. There was only a crater, smoking and black. Vance stared. His mind refused to accept it. He crawled forward, his hands burning on the hot ground. He searched through the ash. He searched for a hand, a shoe, anything. He found a plastic doll. It was half melted. It was the doll Lily had been holding earlier that morning. Vance didn't scream. The sound stuck in his throat. He curled into a ball as the bombardment continued around him. The Krell ships rained fire for 1 hour. They turned the paradise of Eden 4 into a graveyard. They were thorough. They wanted to make sure nothing survived. Eventually, the guns stopped. General Zar watched the devastation from his ship. He laughed, a low, rasping sound. "Send a broadcast to the rest of the galaxy," he ordered. "Tell them this is what happens when soft species try to act like conquerors. The humans will be too terrified to ever leave their home system again." The Krell fleet turned and warped away, leaving the burning planet behind. They thought the job was done. They thought they had taught the humans a lesson in fear. But down in the ash, something moved. Commander Vance pushed a piece of debris off his legs. He stood up. He was bleeding. He was burned. His clothes were torn. He looked around at the silence. The laughter of the children was gone. The smell of honey was replaced by the smell of burning flesh. He looked at the melted doll in his hand. Tears ran down his face, cutting through the soot on his cheeks. But his expression was not one of defeat. His jaw was set so hard his teeth threatened to crack. He walked. He walked for miles through the ruins of his town. He saw the bodies of neighbors. He saw the ruins of the school. He did not stop to help anyone, because there was no one left to help. He reached the planetary communication tower. It was damaged, sparking with electricity, but it still had power. Vance sat in the chair. He bypassed the security protocols. He opened a direct line to Terra, to the High Command of the Earth Federation. The screen flickered to life. A young officer appeared, looking shocked to see a signal from the dead planet. "Eden 4? This is Earth Command. Status report. We detected massive energy spikes. Are there survivors?" Vance didn't answer immediately. He looked into the camera. His eyes were dark, like 2 black holes. "Commander," the officer asked, sounding scared. "Do you need medical evac? Do you need supplies?" "No," Vance said. His voice was quiet. It sounded like grinding stones. "We don't need supplies." "Sir, what happened? Who attacked you?" Vance held up the melted doll. He placed it gently on the console so the camera could see it. "The Krell," Vance said. "They didn't target the bases. They targeted the children." There was silence on the other end of the line. The horror on the young officer's face was visible. "Tell the Admiral," Vance continued. "Tell the Senate. Tell everyone." "Tell them what, sir?" Vance leaned closer to the screen. "Tell them that the Krell didn't just kill our people," Vance whispered, his voice trembling with a cold, terrifying rage. "They killed our mercy. They killed our restraint. They wanted to see what humans are truly capable of." Vance looked up, staring straight into the soul of everyone watching. "Tell them I am sending the coordinates of the Krell homeworld. And tell them to bring the War-Hulks. All of them." The screen went black. The signal cut out. On Eden 4, the wind began to blow again, stirring the ash. The sorrow was gone. The time for grieving would come later. Now, it was time for the galaxy to bleed. In the months following the destruction of Eden 4, the galaxy waited for a scream. Usually, when a species is attacked by a superpower like the Krell Empire, there is a predictable pattern. First, there are frantic diplomatic messages sent to the Galactic Council. Then, there are pleas for mercy, followed by the sight of refugees fleeing in broken ships. Finally, the defeated species begs for a peace treaty, offering resources and territory just to survive. But humanity did none of these things. From the moment Commander Vance's message reached Earth, a strange and terrifying wall of silence fell over human space. Every trade route was closed. Every diplomatic embassy was packed up and vacated. Human merchant ships, normally seen in every corner of the galaxy, simply disappeared. They didn't retreat to a safe harbor, they just vanished into the dark. Inside the grand halls of the Galactic Council, the air was thick with tension. The council was made up of over 100 different alien species, most of whom looked at the Krell with fear. The humans have been silent for 90 days, noted Ambassador Vorak, a tall, insect-like being. No threats. No demands for justice. It is as if Earth has simply stopped existing. General Zar of the Krell sat in his high chair, his 4 eyes blinking with arrogance. He took a sip of a blue liquid from a crystal glass. They are not silent because they are planning, he laughed, his voice echoing in the chamber. They are silent because they are broken. I burned their future. I showed them that we are the masters of the stars. They are hiding in their caves, waiting for the end. Some of the other ambassadors nodded. It made sense. Why would a soft species fight back against a fleet that can turn a planet into a graveyard in an hour? But others felt a cold shiver. They remembered history books that the Krell ignored. They remembered that humans were the only species that had ever survived a death world like Earth. While the Krell celebrated, the deep void of space was not actually empty. Far beyond the borders of known space, in the dark regions where no stars shone, the human race was working. The silence wasn't born of fear, it was born of focus. On Earth, every factory that once made cars was now making tank armor. Every laboratory that once studied medicine was now perfecting chemical lasers and kinetic shells. Millions of humans, men and women who had never held a weapon, queued at recruitment centers. They didn't speak. There were no patriotic songs or loud cheers. There was only a grim, quiet determination. They had seen the footage from Eden 4. They had seen the melted dolls and the empty playgrounds. Humanity didn't want a treaty. They didn't want an apology. They wanted an ending. Back in Krell space, things were starting to feel wrong. It started with the scouts. The Krell relied on a network of small, fast ships to patrol their borders. These ships were supposed to check in every 6 hours. On day 95, Scout Ship K-14 missed its check-in. The Krell Command Center assumed it was a mechanical failure. Then, K-15 went quiet. Then K-16. General Zar was in his private chambers when his commander rushed in. The alien scales were pale, a sign of extreme stress. "General," the officer stammered. "We have lost contact with the entire eastern border. Every sensor station, every scout, every mining colony. They are just gone." Zar stood up, his chitinous armor clanking. "Explain gone. Did they report an attack?" "That is the problem, sir," the officer replied, his voice shaking. There were no distress signals. No screams over the radio. 1 second they were there, and the next, the screen was blank. It's like something is moving through the void and eating the light itself. Zar felt a tiny prickle of doubt in his heart, but he pushed it down. "Send a heavy destroyer fleet to investigate. Whatever pirates are attacking our scouts will learn why the Krell are feared." The Krell destroyer Victory's hand jumped into the dark sector 3 hours later. It was a massive ship, bristling with cannons. Its captain was confident. He arrived at the last known coordinates of the scout ships. "Scan the area," the captain ordered. "Sir," the sensor officer said, his voice high-pitched. "I am picking up debris. It's our scouts. They didn't burn. They weren't hit by plasma." "Then what happened?" "They were crushed, sir. It looks like they were hit by solid metal objects moving at 5% the speed of light. The ships are flattened. The captain opened his mouth to speak, but the ship's alarms began to wail. It wasn't the sound of a lock-on. It was the sound of a proximity alert. Thousands of them. "Where are they?" the captain screamed. "They just appeared," the officer yelled. "They didn't use warp drives. They were drifting. They turned off their engines and drifted in the dark to hide from our sensors." Out of the blackness of the void, the human fleet emerged. These were not the white and blue ships of the Earth Federation. These were the War-Hulks. They were massive, blocky, and painted the color of dried blood and charcoal. They had no windows. They had no elegant curves. They were flying slabs of reinforced steel designed for one purpose: to kill. On the bridge of the lead human ship, the USS Avenger, sat an old man in a black uniform. It was Elias Vance. He wasn't a retired gardener anymore. He was a ghost in a machine. "Commander," his tactical officer said quietly. "The Krell destroyer is hailing us. They are demanding to know our intentions." Vance didn't even look at the communication screen. He looked at a small, melted doll that sat on his dashboard. "Intentions?" Vance whispered. He looked at the massive Krell ship on his view screen. It looked like a toy compared to the fury he was carrying. "Don't answer them," Vance ordered. "We are finished talking. We have been silent for long enough." "Firing solution locked, sir." "Launch the rods," Vance said. From the belly of the Avenger, a massive electromagnetic railgun fired. A 3-ton tungsten rod, accelerated to impossible speeds, tore through the vacuum. It hit the Victory's hand right in its center. There was no explosion of fire, because there was no oxygen in that part of the ship. There was only the violent, terrifying sound of metal screaming as the Krell ship was folded in half like a piece of paper. The Krell destroyer, the pride of their border fleet, was destroyed in 3 seconds. Vance watched the wreckage drift away. He didn't feel happy. He didn't feel proud. He only felt a cold, empty hole where his heart used to be. "Signal the rest of the fleet," Vance said, his voice echoing in the silent bridge. The Krell thought the dark was their friend. "Now, we show them what lives in the shadows." The human fleet, millions of tons of angry steel, ignited their engines all at once. The blue flames of their thrusters lit up the void like 1,000 vengeful eyes. The silence was over. The hunt had begun. The Krell Empire was built on the idea of standard war. In the galaxy, war had rules. You fired shields against lasers. You maneuvered your ships in graceful circles. When your shields dropped to 10%, you signaled your surrender, and the winner took your planet as a prize. It was a game of math and machines. But as the human fleet entered Krell territory, the aliens realized that humanity had forgotten the rules. Or perhaps, they had decided to rewrite them in blood. General Zar stood in the command center of the Krell homeworld, staring at a giant holographic map. The map was covered in red dots representing his glorious fleet. But those dots were disappearing. One by one, the icons flickered and vanished. "Report!" Zar barked, his 4 eyes twitching in different directions. "Why are our defense platforms not firing? Why are the orbital lasers silent?" "Sir," a technician shouted, his hands trembling over the control panel. "The humans, they aren't using lasers. They aren't using plasma. Our shields are designed to deflect energy, but they are throwing rocks. Giant, heavy, metal rocks." It was true. Humanity had reached back into its primitive history. Thousands of years ago, humans threw stones. Then they threw spears. Then they fired bullets. Now, they were firing massive tungsten poles the size of skyscrapers. These rods from God didn't care about energy shields. They simply punched through the Krell ships like a needle through silk. The Krell called their ships dreadnoughts. The humans called theirs industrial hammers. In the center of the battle for the Krell's outer moon, the human ship the Iron Will was surrounded. 3 Krell cruisers were hitting it with everything they had. Purple plasma beams melted the outer layer of the human ship's armor. Steam and molten metal sprayed into the void. Any other species would have retreated. Any other ship would have exploded. But the Iron Will did not move. It absorbed the damage. Inside, the human crew didn't scream. They wore heavy environmental suits, their faces hidden behind dark visors. They worked in a ship that was vibrating so hard it threatened to tear itself apart, yet they stayed at their stations. Armor at 40%, the tactical officer reported to Captain Sarah Miller. Ignore it, Miller replied. She was a woman who had lost her brother on Eden 4. Her voice was as cold as a winter night. Line up the prow. If we can't shoot them, we will break them. The Krell captains watched in horror as the burning, melting human ship ignited its massive rear engines. The Iron Will didn't turn to fire its guns. It accelerated. It became a multi-ton bullet. The Krell tried to move, but they were too slow. The human ship slammed into the side of the lead Krell cruiser. There was no fire in the vacuum, just a terrifying display of raw kinetic force. The Krell ship snapped. Metal twisted and groaned as the human ship rode through the wreckage, still moving, still fighting. Across the galaxy, the old gods of humanity, the spirits of wrath and persistence, had truly awakened. Humanity was using tactics the galaxy hadn't seen in a million years. They used boarding pods that were essentially drill-tipped missiles. These pods slammed into Krell ships, and outstepped human soldiers in power suits. These were not light scouts, they were walking tanks. The Krell soldiers, who were used to fighting with long-range blasters, were terrified. The humans didn't stay at a distance. They broke down doors. They used heavy hydraulic fists to crush alien armor. They used short-range shotguns that turned the narrow hallways of the Krell ships into hallways of death. One Krell commander sent a desperate transmission back to his home planet. They aren't fighting for territory, he screamed into the camera. Behind him, the sound of metal being ripped open could be heard. They aren't taking prisoners. They don't want our gold. They don't want our ships. They just want us to stop breathing. General Zar, you told us they were soft. You lied. They are. The transmission cut to static as a human hand, covered in black steel armor, smashed the camera. General Zar watched the screen go black. For the first time in his life, he felt a drop of cold sweat slide down his back. He looked at his officers. They were all looking at him. The arrogance was gone. The laughter was dead. They are monsters, whispered one officer. No, Zar said, trying to find his courage. They are just animals. We will lure them to the vortex gate. We will use our gravity wells to trap their heavy ships. They have no mercy, but we have superior technology. We will crush them with logic. But Zar was wrong. Logic works when your enemy wants to survive. Logic fails when your enemy has already accepted their death. On the bridge of the USS Avenger, Elias Vance stood looking at the tactical display. His fleet was taking heavy losses. Human ships were exploding. Thousands of men and women were dying in the cold dark. But for every human ship that fell, 3 Krell ships were erased. Commander, his AI voice whispered. The Krell are retreating toward their inner sanctum. They are setting a trap. Their gravity mines are active. Vance looked at the photo of Lily he kept in his pocket. He remembered the smell of the honey on Eden 4. He remembered how the Krell had laughed while they burned children. Let them set their traps, Vance said. He looked at his fleet, the black, blocky, scarred ships of Earth. The Krell think they are fighting a war. They still don't understand. What do they not understand, sir? The officer asked. Vance turned his gaze toward the Krell homeworld, glowing in the distance. They think we are here to win, Vance said. They don't realize that we have already lost everything that mattered. When you have nothing left to lose, you don't fight to win. You fight to make sure your enemy loses more. Vance gripped the edge of his command chair. Full thrusters. Into the trap. If the Krell want to pull us into the grave, tell them we are happy to lead the way. The human fleet roared. They didn't slow down. They didn't scan for mines. They charged into the heart of the Krell Empire like a swarm of angry hornets, ready to sting until they died. The galaxy watched in awe and horror. The soft humans were gone. The old gods of war were now the only ones in charge. In the galaxy, when a war is fought, the civilians on the home planets usually watch the news with a sense of distance. They see maps changing colors and hear about ships lost in faraway sectors. They feel safe behind their planetary shields. But humanity decided that if the children of Earth could not be safe in their beds, then no one in the Krell Empire would ever feel safe again. General Zar stood in the Krell High Temple, surrounded by the elite leaders of his species. Outside, the sky of their homeworld, Krell Prime, was still clear. Their massive planetary shield, a shimmering dome of golden energy, was the most powerful in the galaxy. It could stop 1,000 nukes. It could deflect a sun's flare. The humans are barbaric, but they cannot get through the golden shield, Zar told the frightened council. They are stuck in orbit, crashing their ships against our walls like insects against glass. Eventually, they will run out of metal. Eventually, they will go home. But even as he spoke, every screen in the temple, and every screen on the entire planet, flickered. The Krell were a technologically advanced race. Their lives were controlled by a planetary network called the Eye. It ran their transport, their food distribution, and their entertainment. Suddenly, the official Krell propaganda vanished. The screens did not show human soldiers. They did not show a list of demands. Instead, they showed the high-definition security footage from the schools of Eden 4. The Krell civilians, millions of them, looked up at the giant billboards in their cities. They saw human children playing. They saw a little girl on a swing. They heard her laughter piped through the city's audio speakers. For 5 minutes, the entire Krell world was filled with the sounds of human joy. Then, the footage showed the Krell ships arriving. It showed the purple plasma beams hitting the playgrounds. It showed the silence that followed. A voice, deep and hollow, echoed through every house, every car, and every headset on the planet. It was the voice of Elias Vance, but it sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a grave. "You watched this for entertainment," the voice said in the Krell language. "You cheered when your general told you the soft humans were broken. You went to sleep that night feeling powerful. Now, we want you to feel what we feel." Suddenly, the footage changed. It wasn't Eden 4 anymore. It was a live feed of the Krell's own orbital shipyards. The Krell watched as a human War-Hulk rammed into their central refueling station. They watched as thousands of Krell workers were sucked into the vacuum of space. The camera didn't turn away. It zoomed in. It showed the terror on the faces of the Krell as they died. Then, the voice spoke again. "We are not here to occupy your cities. We are not here to take your resources. We are here to be the ghost in your machine." The psychological war had only just begun. The humans didn't just hack the screens, they hacked the Eye itself. In the middle of the night, the Krell cities became nightmares. The streetlights would turn off for exactly 3 seconds, then flash red. The automatic doors of houses would lock and unlock on their own. The Krell's own AI assistants would start whispering the names of the dead children of Eden 4 in the middle of the dark. General Zar tried to shut down the network, but his engineers were crying. "We can't, General. The human virus is eating our code. It's not just a program, it's a digital monster. It's replicating faster than we can delete it. It's using our own power grids to scream at us." The Krell civilians began to lose their minds. They couldn't sleep. Every time they closed their eyes, they heard the laughter of the children they had murdered. They felt the silence of the void creeping into their own homes. But the true horror was the ghost ships. The human fleet didn't just sit at the Golden Shield. They used their smaller stealth craft to drop thousands of tiny, black boxes into the Krell atmosphere. These boxes didn't explode. They were sonic projectors. At random times during the day, a sonic projector would activate over a Krell city. It would create a sound so loud and so mournful that it caused the Krell to fall to their knees. It was the sound of 1,000 human mothers screaming in grief. The sound vibrated through the chitinous armor of the Krell, shaking their very bones. The message was clear: you took our peace. We will take your sanity. Inside the command center, General Zar was breaking. He hadn't slept in 4 days. He saw shadows in the corners of his room. He felt like the humans were already inside the palace, even though the golden shield was still up. Why won't they just fight us? Zar screamed at the empty air. Why won't they just fire their guns and get it over with? A screen on his desk turned on. It was Elias Vance. He was sitting in his command chair, holding a piece of bread and a cup of water. He looked bored. He looked like a man waiting for a bus. Because, Zar, Vance said quietly. If we kill you now, your pain ends. We don't want your pain to end. We want you to sit in your beautiful palace and watch your empire fall apart from the inside. We want you to look at your children and wonder if today is the day we find a way through that shield. You are monsters. Zar spat. Vance nodded slowly. You made us this way. You looked at a garden and saw a target. You looked at a grandfather and saw a victim. You invited the monster into your house, Zar. Now, you have to live with him. Vance leaned forward, his eyes burning with a terrifying light. By the way, Zar. Have you checked the pressure in your oxygen tanks lately? The virus just found the life support controls. The screen went black. In that moment, Zar realized the true power of humanity. It wasn't their ships. It wasn't their railguns. It was their ability to turn their own broken hearts into a weapon. They weren't just fighting a war, they were conducting a funeral for the Krell Empire, and they were making the Krell watch every second of it. Panic began to rise in the streets below. The Krell were no longer a proud empire. They were a terrified species, trapped in a cage of their own making, waiting for the humans to decide when the true power would finally strike the final blow. The time for psychological games had passed. The Krell Empire was already a hollow shell, trembling in the dark. Now, humanity was ready to deliver the final strike. The target was the Golden Shield, the ultimate defense of Krell Prime. For centuries, the Krell believed the shield was impenetrable. It was powered by the planet's core itself. It was a masterpiece of alien engineering. But humanity had spent the last several weeks analyzing it, not with scientists, but with the cold eyes of hunters looking for a weak spot in a beast's hide. General Zar stood on the balcony of his high palace. Above him, the sky was a shimmering gold, but beyond that gold, he could see the black silhouettes of the human War-Hulks. They were moving into a strange formation. They weren't spread out anymore. They were gathering into a single, massive line, a spear pointed at the heart of his world. General, his lead engineer whispered, his voice shaking. The humans are doing something impossible. They aren't firing their railguns. They are connecting their ships. Zar looked through his macro binoculars. He saw the massive human ships moving closer to one another. Heavy magnetic tethers, thick as canyons, locked the ships together. Hundreds of War-Hulks were forming a giant ring in orbit. What is the purpose of this? Zar demanded. They are making themselves one big target. Fire the orbital beams. The Krell fired. Massive beams of purple energy shot upward from the planet's surface, striking the human ring. But the humans didn't dodge. The ring of ships began to spin. As they spun, they shared their energy, using their combined armor to soak up the heat. They were no longer individual ships, they were a single machine. In the center of that machine, a massive object began to glow. It was a focusing lens made of pure industrial diamond and reinforced steel. On the bridge of the USS Avenger, Elias Vance sat in his chair. He looked older than he had a month ago, but his hand was steady. He was now the conductor of an orchestra of destruction. All ships, divert 100% of reactor power to the focusing lens, Vance ordered. I don't care if your life support fails. I don't care if your lights go out. Give me everything. Inside the human ships, the crew sat in total darkness. The only sound was the hum of the massive engines working at 300% capacity. The heat was becoming unbearable. The metal walls began to glow red. But no one moved. No one complained. They knew what this was for. Lens is at maximum capacity, the AI reported. We are ready to fire the sun spear. Fire, Vance said. A beam of pure, white light, hotter than the surface of a star, erupted from the center of the human ring. It didn't hit the golden shield with an explosion. It hit it with a scream. The golden shield, the pride of the Krell, began to ripple. Where the white light touched the gold, the energy started to boil. The sky over Krell Prime turned from gold to a blinding, painful white. Down in the cities, the Krell civilians covered their eyes. The heat was rising. The grass in the parks began to wither. The water in the fountains began to steam. The golden shield was no longer protecting them, it was becoming a magnifying glass, cooking the planet beneath it. The shield is failing, the Krell engineer screamed. The core generators are melting. General, we have to turn it off or the planet will explode. Zar looked at the sky. He saw the golden shield cracking like a piece of glass. Huge chunks of the energy field were disappearing, leaving the planet exposed to the cold vacuum. Turn it off, Zar whispered, defeated. Lower the shield. We surrender. The golden shield vanished. The sky of Krell Prime was suddenly open and dark. General Zar waited for the bombs. He waited for the humans to rain fire down and erase his people, just as he had done to the humans on Eden 4. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end. But the bombs didn't fall. Instead, thousands of small, white objects began to drift down from the human fleet. They looked like snow falling through the dark sky. Zar reached out his hand and caught one. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a canister of gas. It was a leaf. A digital, synthetic leaf from a maple tree, like the ones that grew on Eden 4. On the back of the leaf, there was a message written in every language of the Krell Empire. We are not you. Then, the true siege began. The humans didn't destroy the cities. They destroyed the utility of the cities. Small, precise kinetic strikes hit every power plant. They hit every water filtration system. They hit every satellite and every communication hub. Within 10 minutes, the entire Krell civilization was pushed back to the Stone Age. Their lights went out. Their computers died. Their high-tech weapons became useless pieces of metal. The human fleet began to descend. Not to kill, but to watch. Massive War-Hulks hovered just a few hundred feet above the Krell skyscrapers. They were so large they blocked out the sun. They didn't fire a single shot. They just stayed there, silent and imposing, like giant tombstones in the sky. Elias Vance's voice returned to the planetary speakers, powered by the humans' own portable towers. General Zar, Vance said. You thought you could destroy our future by killing our children. You were wrong. Our future is not built on buildings or ships. It is built on the memory of what we protect. Vance's ship, the Avenger, lowered itself until it was hovering directly over Zar's palace balcony. The wind from the massive engines nearly blew the general off his feet. We will not kill your people, Vance continued. That would be too easy. Instead, we are leaving you here. You have no power. You have no tech. You have no way to leave this planet. You will spend the next 1,000 years looking up at the stars, knowing that we are out there. You will tell your children the story of Eden 4. You will tell them that humanity is kind, humanity is peaceful, but if you wake the monster does not stop until the cage is empty. The Krell looked up in silence. Their empire was gone. Their pride was gone. They were alive, but they were prisoners on their own world. Why? Zar yelled at the ship above him. Why leave us alive? The hatch of the Avenger opened for a brief second. A small object was tossed out. It fell through the air and landed at Zar's feet. It was Lily's melted doll. So you never forget the price, Vance's voice echoed one last time. The human fleet ignited their engines. With a thunderous roar that shook the very foundations of the planet, the millions of tons of steel rose back into the stars. They left Krell Prime in total darkness, a silent world beneath a silent sky. Humanity had shown its true power. It wasn't the power to kill. It was the power to decide who gets to live with their regret. A year had passed since the sky over Krell Prime had burned white. Across the galaxy, the human silence had finally ended, but the universe felt like a different place. The stars were the same, and the planets still spun in their orbits, but the atmosphere of the Galactic Council had changed forever. The council chamber was full. Every major species was present, their eyes fixed on the empty seat where the Krell representatives used to sit. That seat was now a permanent memorial, a block of black stone with no name on it. It served as a reminder of what happens when a species mistakes human kindness for human weakness. Ambassador Vorak stood at the center of the hall. He looked at the human representative, a calm woman in a simple suit. She didn't carry a weapon. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Behind her, on a massive screen, was the updated map of the galaxy. The Krell Empire was gone. It wasn't just defeated, it had been erased from the galactic network. Their planet, Krell Prime, was now a forbidden zone. No ships were allowed to land there. No signals were allowed to leave. The humans had placed a ring of automated watcher satellites around the world. These satellites didn't fire lasers, they simply broadcasted the sounds of Earth's forests and oceans down to the Krell, a constant reminder of the paradise they tried to destroy. The Council has reviewed the Terran Protection Act, Vorak announced, his voice echoing in the silent room. From this day forward, any act of aggression against a non-combatant human colony will be viewed as an act of total war. Not just by the Council, but by the species involved. We have seen the true power of the Terrans. We do not wish to see it again. The human ambassador nodded slowly. Humanity does not want to rule you, she said clearly. We want to trade with you. We want to learn from you. We want to explore the stars alongside you. We are a species of builders, doctors, and poets. But let the Krell be the final lesson, do not force us to be soldiers. Because when a human becomes a soldier, they do not stop until the threat is gone. While the politicians spoke in the high towers of the capital, life on Eden 4 was beginning to bloom again. The planet was still scarred. There were patches of black earth where the grass had not yet grown back. The ruins of the old cities had been cleared away, and new, modest homes were being built. This time, however, the homes were built with a hidden layer of reinforced steel. The schools were built with underground shelters that could withstand a nuclear blast. Humanity was rebuilding, but they were no longer naive. Elias Vance stood on a new porch, overlooking a new garden. He was much thinner now, and he walked with a cane. The war had taken a heavy toll on his body, but his eyes were clear. The dark, hollow look was gone. In its place was a quiet, tired peace. He wasn't alone. A group of young children played in the distance. They were the children of the New Eden. They didn't know the full horror of what had happened, but they knew that they were protected. Vance looked down at his hand. He was holding a small, wooden carving. It was a bird, simple and smooth. He had spent the morning carving it for the new neighborhood school. He sat back in his chair and watched the sun set. The sky was blue, a perfect, soft blue. No shadows moved across it. The War-Hulks were gone, parked in deep space stations far from the eyes of civilians. Humanity had put their monsters back in the cage. But the cage was no longer locked. The galaxy knew exactly where the key was kept. In the final report sent to the United Earth government, the historians wrote a closing chapter that would be taught in every school for 1,000 years. We often ask why humanity is so protective of its young. Other species see offspring as biological data or future workers. But for humans, a child is the only piece of the future we can touch. When the Krell attacked our children, they didn't just break a law, they tried to steal our tomorrow. They forgot that humans are the only creatures on Earth that will fight a lion with their bare hands to save a cub. They forgot that our mercy is a choice, not a requirement. The report ended with a single, powerful sentence. The galaxy used to fear the dark. Now, the dark fears us. As the stars began to twinkle over Eden 4, a small ship landed at the local spaceport. It wasn't a military vessel. It was a transport ship bringing more families, more seeds, and more dreams. A young boy ran off the ship, stopping to look at the massive statue in the center of the town square. It was a statue of a soldier and a child. The soldier's rifle was slung over his back, and he was holding the child's hand, pointing toward the horizon. The boy turned to his father. "Who is that, Dad?" The father looked at the statue, then at the quiet, gray-haired man sitting on the porch in the distance. He knelt down and put a hand on his son's shoulder. "That is a reminder, son," the father said. "It reminds the galaxy that humans love peace more than anyone else. But it also reminds them why they should never, ever make us stop being peaceful." The boy nodded, though he didn't fully understand. He ran off to play in the green grass, his laughter echoing through the air. Elias Vance heard the laughter. He closed his eyes and smiled. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like a void. It felt like a song. Humanity had reminded the galaxy why they were fearless. Not because they couldn't be killed, but because they had something worth dying for. And as long as there were children playing under a blue sky, the true power of Earth would stay exactly where it belonged, ready, waiting, and eternal.